Welcome, everyone. My name is Kimberly Bradley. I'm the Conversations Curator at Art Basel in Basel. I might wait for that to end.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Our panel tonight will delve into the practices of two of the painters in the exhibition When We See Us, A Century of Black Figuration, on view now at Kunstmuseum Basel. In the center is Zimbabwe-born, London-based Violet Hwami. Right near me is Tschabalala self from New York. Moderating the panel tonight will be Koyo Kouoh, the Executive Director and Chief Curator of Zeitz Museum in Cape Town, South Africa. This panel is presented in collaboration with Kunstmuseum Basel, and I forgot to have you applaud for the speakers on stage. A big round of applause for everybody. Sorry about that. There's time for questions at the end of the hour, and enjoy the conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Kimberly. Good afternoon, good early evening. It's a great pleasure to sit here with two brilliant young artists that have been watching, following, basically since they came out of art school. Of course, before I continue, I of course want to thank our entire team at Kunstmuseum Basel for this incredible collaboration and the fruition of this project of bringing When We See Us, A Century of Black Figuration to, I almost said to Cape Town, to Basel. And my colleague Maya Wismer is in the room, my co-curator Tandanzani Dlakama, Deputy Director of Kunstmuseum. I see Anita Haldeman is here. I can't see further than that. So we'll have a conversation that really is about the practice of Kudzanai and Tschabalala. And while we are speaking, you have a slideshow of works by both artists that will be rolling. We will not necessarily speak specifically to a specific artwork, but we will speak generally about the show and the content of their practice and how their participation in the show participates in the longer conversation of the continuum of figurative painting. So When We See Us is a century of Black figuration, and I hope that all of you have already seen the show. If not, you should do so. When We See Us, a century of Black figuration celebrates global Black subjectivities and the multiplicity of the Black experience both on the continent and in the very vast African diaspora. The show on the pins is on the pin with the perpetuation, essence, and phenomenon of Black joy. Joy can be radical and political, and particularly when joy is expressed by people who have been and continue to be systemically oppressed and subjected to enduring racist stereotypes. So through this exhibition, however, we wanted to center Black joy. And through the show, you can see how joy, or actually the refusal to centralize violence and trauma, manifests through chapters such as the everyday, joy, revelry, repose, sensuality, spirituality, triumph, and emancipation. When We See Us is also an intergenerational, pan-diasporic conversation between Black artists that have never been shown together, that have never been put together in conversation, whereas the focus of their work, the essence of the spirituality, the essence of their practice is very strongly related. So people like Romeo Bearden and George Pemba, for instance, or Ellen Sibidi and Joy Labinjo, Bifo Dilone and Lynette Yadomboache, Valente Malangatana, Wilfredo Lam and Amy Sherald. How does all these practices come into conversation to express sentiments and positions around Blackness? And of course, Tschabalala self and Kudzanai-Violet Hwami are part of this major chorus of Black voices spanning from Black geographies from the last 100 years. So figuration itself is the oldest, one of the oldest artistic practices that we know. And as such, it has established as a canon of study. It has established a focus of interest. It has established a trajectory. And figuration is accessible because we all navigate this existence that we are gifted with through the body as the figure, and which makes figuration very relatable. So through When We See Us, we wanted to look at simultaneity of practice. We wanted to look at parallel aesthetics. And Tschabalala and Kudzanai, you are part of this important art historical canon and part of this historical continuum of Black figuration. So I have a very first easy question. What does it mean for you to be part of this historic exhibition? You've seen the show earlier today. So how do you feel? What does it mean for you and how do you feel? It's two different things. Anyone can take it.
Well, I'm very honored to be part of the show. As you said, it's a rare opportunity to be in like a pan-diasporic show, especially one that shows art from, I know the oldest artist in the show is Clementine Hunter, who was born in the 19th century. And then the youngest artist in the show was born in 1999. So it's also for the show to kind of cover that amount of time, and also for it to be purely dedicated to painting and purely dedicated to figuration, I think is also very unique. So I was just mostly excited about to be in that context, be placed in that context, and for it to be a truly global context as well. So that was one of the most exciting things about being part of the show.
Firstly, thank you so much for curating the show. I think for me as a Zimbabwean artist, or rather an African artist, what I feel is a sense of home, is that you've managed to bring in different artists from different continents, from African descent, and it feels that for the first time the work that I make is seen for its for what it is, and not necessarily this idea that the work is just I'm making a black painting, let's say, because the separation between the rooms, I find that like really clever, and that is. So I feel like it's a sort of like coming together, the past and present artists.
That's very interesting. Kutsi, you engage with issues of identity a lot in your work, and also with representation of the Black body, sexuality and spirituality. And you also use digital collage because your work emanates a lot from collage, from online research, from, from photography. Yeah, it's disturbing to me. So, stemming from this non-painterly research, or called non-painterly starting point in your work, and your work is often really created around large-scale portraits, like the one that is in the exhibition, of yourself, of your entourage, your family, combining oil and other media. And memory plays a big role in your work. Can you talk about that, how you translate memory into paintings, and how the research, the original research of, images and representations that you translate from non-painterly base and to become a painting?
Yeah, I think what it is that how the paintings emerged was coming at it from a person whose history has been erased. The history of Zimbabwe, colonialism, not having sort of the education behind my family lineage or like heritage, because of migration as well and how that played the part. And so when I began making my paintings, it was very important for me to view these photographs that I found from my aunts. I stole these photographs from my aunt's album, and it was important for me to reimagine them instead of telling their story, let's say. I approached it in a playful way where, yes, I am looking at an old photograph, but I am also filling in the gaps. I am also rewriting my ideas of these, the people. And it was a natural way for me to sort of to erase the past.
It's interesting that you say there's a natural way to erase the past, because I see an element of nostalgia in your work a lot. So how do you combine that?
Well, I mean, I am using photographs that were taken in the 1970s and 80s. But the erasure is that I am not bound to what these figures are. And because I'm not bound, they kind of open up more ideas and stories, and they're relatable as well, because there's someone from Senegal can relate to these images. That, yes, there's a sense of nostalgia, but I like to not bound them in history or in I kind of see them as like they don't look futuristic at all.
Yeah.
But they are me reimagining, but also centering the future.
Yeah.
In a way.
That's very
I
interesting.
don't know if that makes sense.
I'll come back to that at some point. Chaba, you often portray Black women figures and using paint and other media and other forms of expression. I mean, other materiality of expression, not necessarily form. And you make collages, from various items collected, and depict multidimensional bodies, and that really defy the very narrow, gendered, racialized spaces in which, Black body exists. and your social and political commentary is also often derived from, of course, the history of your background, which is the history of African American struggle. Can you speak to that a little bit? Just elaborate for us a little bit to understand what feeds into your making these figures.
So I think that my work is like deeply American. So my family is Black American, so I'm a descendant of American slavery. So having had that like history, again, my bloodline, is, I think that most Black Americans can identify that figuration is particularly important for that aspect of the diaspora, because having physical autonomy was a more recent phenomenon in our lineage than as it has been historically, because Black Americans were enslaved for longer than they've actually been emancipated in America. So the importance of the body and what it means to know one's body, to have power and possession over one's body, is a very serious and quite politicized concept in the Americas, because slavery is not just a phenomenon within America, it's also happened throughout all of the Americas, South and North America, to all people in diaspora. So I think from a historical perspective, that's one of the reasons why I'm particularly intrigued by the figure. And apart from that historical legacy, I feel like the Black body or the Black image is often used to like represent certain cultural ideas that have really nothing to do with a real idea of Blackness. Is kind of what Black bodies use as like euphemism, I think, oftentimes in the West, in the global West, to communicate certain kind of like ideologies. So a lot of the images that already exist that represent Black people, I think, are often like skewed or negative or incomplete or flattened. So I like to add this like formal complexity to the paintings and to the figures, having them be multi-layered and having them have like various aspects, like compose them, is because I want to show the complexity of the true experience. And also to show that when it comes to identity, that some parts of your identity are inherent to you, but also some of them are fashioned and some of them are projected, some of them are attached to you as well. So by having the works be made in such a way that reflects my own like personal like feelings about identity, I feel like the viewers can understand my perspective without me even being there to advocate for my work. So it becomes like a more fluid understanding between the audience and the artwork.
It's very good. I mean, you give me a segue to my kind of next point, is that, I mean, you said it very clearly, and we all know it, that the Black American experience stems very much from the enslavement enterprise. And but to a certain extent, you both work in figuration as a mode of kind of, and you both said it's inscribing yourself also into space, you know, so as self-writing and as self-narrating, so to speak. And Achille Mbembe, who's a great social scientist from Cameroon that I love, gifted us with the world, gifted us with a text on modes of self-writing, and where he really invites Africans and people of African descent to liberate themselves from the temporal and emotional and dialectical prison that the trinity of enslavement, colonization, and apartheid has really locked our imaginaries. So as a prompt really to understand the Black experience in the world in a larger and more empowering framework of self, of a definition of self. I invite you to comment on that. How do you feel about that kind of proposition and that kind of, you know, position? The idea of, you know, reclaiming a temporality that breaks the boundaries of the Trinity. I call it the Trinity, you know, of enslavement, colonization, and apartheid. And how do you think that your work participate in that as well?
I can go first.
Anyone?
No, I think I like the Trinity part because going into art school and making paintings making figurative paintings was sort of looked down upon. Looked down upon in art school at the time, and it's sort of like I had to make how my work sort of enters that is that like I said earlier, is the erasure of, I did not want my work to, for so long, I did not want the work to be political, did not want it to be, to speak on colonialism. I did not want the work to I wanted to discover my own identity as a human being. And I guess there is I think you've used this word, I've heard you use this word, the black body. I don't like that term.
Okay. We can talk about that too, but
I don't like the term because it's places the figures in the paintings as just objects, something to observe. And I don't know if I'm successful in this, but to bring my work back to myself and to my humanity. And I've wanted to sort of like create a universe of which these figures exist outside of the three Trinity, which is impossible, of course, but when I'm making the work, that is where my mind is. There is sort of like a freedom, a creative imagination, wonder, to transcend this. I don't want to say a trap, but
that's very interesting that you say that, because when we see us in some way is exactly an exhibition that decenters completely the usual expectations about black art, so to speak, speaking to issues, speaking to violence, speaking to trauma, and so on. So it's really interesting that you say that when you were going to art school, you deliberately wanted to make non-political art as an African young black female artist. So I will come to that quickly, but I would like to hear you, Chaba, about this proposal of Ashimbembe to really look at the black experience in a much larger temporality than the trinity of enslavement, colonization, and apartheid.
I agree with the prompt. I think that it's important to have conversations about Black people outside of that framework. I also think it's important to have conversations about Blackness that are not in relation to whiteness. So I think that's also that's possible and is rarely done. And I feel like that's also would generally be more productive if people can have conversations about what does a Black identity mean within the vacuum of the Black identity. But I feel like a lot of artists desire to, make work outside of that trinity. And I feel like one of the ways to do that is just to focus on the human experience, or the existential dread that we all kind of feel, and we focus even on the spirit, focus on things that are kind of outside of your corporal experience of being embodied, actually. And I think that's a great prompt for everyone to have in their mind when making any artwork, because it's something that's very aspirational. And I think it's good to aspire towards that. And I think that you should also leave room for like just the reality of, that people do live under political constraints. So there has to be room in your artwork, I think, to have space for both conversations, for a humanistic conversation about what does it mean just to be a person in the world, but also a conversation about what does it mean to be a kind of person like you in the world. I think honestly having both conversations at the same time is the most effective, because when you talk about just having like general humanistic concerns, it becomes even more tragic that someone has to have those concerns, which are already enough of a burden, and then on top of that have the compounded concerns of being ostracized or being placed under even more psychological and emotional and political stress because of racism, sexism, any number of things that can come based on one's identity that can make them feel othered in society at large. But I think that, I've always wanted to make art as a means of liberation, but it's somewhat like egocentric, like to liberate myself as an individual person. But I think that whatever concerns I have, other people can identify with them. So if I'm making any kind of headway in liberating myself through my work, other people, I imagine, can glean inspiration from that as well, especially people that have the most in common with me. So that's always been kind of my thinking about it.
I like this proposal of Achille, and it has really been, inspiring Tanzania and I a lot in terms of how do you, even in our institutional work at the museum, one of the things that we are constantly thinking through is how do we make institutional work and how do we make museum work that really speaks not only to the mission of the museum, which is Africa and African diasporic work, but that really also brings to the table the non-usual topics and the non-usual suspect, just about, beauty and spirit, as you say.
Playfulness.
Excuse me?
Playfulness.
Playfulness, idleness even, repose. All these kind of spaces that kind of generally and generically Blackness is not associated with, unless it is somehow, in the context of, as you said, from the other gaze, so to speak, looking at us. So I like what you said about it, and I also, just to come back to you, Kudzi, about this drive and this need to make so-called non-political work. I don't believe that any work is non-political, but that's another conversation. But what really kind of pushed you and drove you? What was in your surrounding that you were thinking that, I guess I know, but I really want to hear you say it, that you want to make work that really decenters violence and really talks about basically the everyday of Black life?
I think when you live within that framework on your day-to-day, your day-to-day existence is to be aware of racism, be aware of sexism, be aware of homophobia. It can become a bit heavy. And to go to the studio and having to address that as well, I wanted freedom and to be, the drive was to create a space for myself, sort of like a meditation space, to learn a skill, to apply my spirit onto canvas. And that was the drive. And also to include the thing is, one's identity, you cannot escape it. And you're right, no, art is political. But I hope I'm very much aware that my just being black is is political. I don't have to do a lot of work for anyone else on that front. I'm already existing within that framework. So really what needed to happen was to create like a, I don't know, shrine within my studio and just
A shrine to
a
yourself.
shrine to myself, yes.
That's the next level. I'd like to go to, and this is to both of you, and anyone can take turns. I'd like to ask you, what does painting as a medium, as a materiality, as a texture, do for you or not? Particularly you, Chaba, you don't only use paint. And it sort of reminds me somehow from the, Negro-African tradition of image making, that paint is one material that one can use, and you really translate it well with also using fabrics, also using threads, also using other materials. But still, if we go back to the painting as a material, what does it do for you, and that you cannot do without painting? And for you, it's very clear, you use painting. What does painting do for you? Or paint, not painting, paint, basically.
The paint itself, apart from the paintings, it just allows you to kind of just build anything. You can like world build, I think, with the canvas. I mean, you can. It's almost like a portal into a different universe. So you just have the opportunity to really make anything. This is what I find so inspiring about painting. And yeah, I mean, the flatness of it, the fact that it exists on this wall, it really does feel like you're kind of can enter into like almost a different dimensional space by just your own means with relatively simple materials. So that's what I've always found really inspiring about paint itself. And then in regard to painting, the reason why I like that medium is because I feel like it's like one of the oldest ways in which people have created art. And it's also something that is very transcultural. So there's such a huge history of painting in Europe. There's a history of painting also in Africa, in the Americas. So it's something in Asia, like it's something that all over the world people have done paintings. So it's also a way for me to kind of interject my own voice into this larger global canon. Not to say people haven't worked in other mediums as well, but I've always wanted to be in dialogue with the history of painting in particular. So to fully engage with that, I always saw myself as a painter and wanted to identify as a painter and kind of move into my my artistic expression primarily as a painter. Also, from painting, I've kind of learned how to do everything else that I enjoy doing in the arts. And I just enjoy the philosophy of painting as well. I feel like what really painting is, when it comes down to it, is the gesture of putting two things next to one another and then seeing how they change, how one color transforms the next. And that as a philosophy can really be applied to any number of different things as well. So
That's beautiful. What does paint do for you, Kutsi? And painting, for the matter.
No, I'm with Tschabalala on this creating worlds, and I think economically as well. I mean, when you are starting off, when young artists are, I think that is the first medium you're introduced to when you are starting off. At least for me, that was the artists that inspired me have always, they were painters. And it's a easier material medium to manipulate, to build worlds, to to engage with as well. And its accessibility to, let's say, my mother. My mother would not understand. We went to see we just went to see this exhibition. I forgot it.
Which one? It doesn't matter.
It's at the museum.
Here.
Yes.
The Japan.
No,
Prince.
there's another.
Dan Flavin?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my mother would not understand what's happening, and it's like what I love as well about the show that you have at the museum is that there is that accessibility, and to me, that is what brought me to paint, and yeah, I mean, I if I ever do something with the blessings I've been given, it would be to create a painting school, because this is where my love is, and
it's beautiful. I mean, Chaba, you were born and raised in Harlem, and can I ask you, what is your concept of home, and how has that influenced your practice? Because both of your practice are a lot about interiority to a large extent. So maybe you want to speak about that level of interiority. So what's the idea of home? What is the idea of familiarity in your work, and how does that actually, participate in how you create your work?
Well, for me, home is, when I think about home, the first thing that comes to mind is actually probably like where I live now, which is not Harlem. I live now in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. So I have like kind of memories in succession. So I'll think about where I'm at now, but then I also think about my birthplace, like the literal family home that I grew up in Harlem. That will come to mind next. And then I think maybe third, like after that, would be actually the community of people that I feel at home with. So those are kind of my immediate associations with the idea of home. And I've dealt with the idea of home as well quite a lot in one particular series called Homebodies, where I kind of looked at the looking at the home as a political space, but also as a deeply psychological space. And I chose the home because I feel like everyone has an understanding of a home as a concept, but in terms of like their own personal experiences, it varies so much. So while the home is like a fixed location, it's also somewhat abstract as like a real place, because everyone's experience is so different. And to me, it was analogous to like a liminal space because of that level of abstraction that exists in like the idea. And I've always have just dealt with the liminal spaces with the figures in general. So in recent years, I've been trying to find environments that I think are analogous to this kind of like boundless environment. So that's another reason I was very, very much interested in the home, as making it like almost like a set for the characters, for the figures to kind of perform within. And despite the home being a private space, I do think that there's quite a lot of performativity there, a lot of expectations, and that was kind of more on the political side of the investigations and the paintings. So.
What's your take on that question, Kutsi?
Oh.
Yeah, because I mean, you were born in Zimbabwe. You lived in South Africa. You've spent quite some formative years of your life in South Africa. Moved to the UK, contemplating now maybe moving back to the continent, and your work is imbued by this space of the idea of home, this familiarity, your entourage, your family, your loved ones. So can you speak to that?
For a long time, home has been the internet, actually. There is, because my families have been scattered. Zimbabwe economic situation. This is a very common thing, is that we have the WhatsApp groups, and this is our way of communicating. And also, growing up kind of in an environment where you've been in a situation where you've been dotted around. So living Zimbabwe in my formative years, and then living in South Africa in my teenage years, and then suddenly being here, being in Europe, never got to create community. So home has always been these subcultures, online chats, and in a sense, I feel that existing without being placed in one country, to me, is there's freedom in that. I don't have to. I don't know. I'm still searching. Let's put it that way. But the internet is certainly like the place where there is a. I feel like I belong.
Just allow me a very quick follow-up question to that. I mean, when you say that, and I know it, that, and you are the generation of Gen Z, that your internet is very much part of the space of your imagination even. And for me, it contrasts drastically with the work that you produce that is in a space of a lot of texture, lushness, bright colors, and so on. So how does that live together?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I think it's made more clear now because of AI, is that the human spirit has to exist somewhere. And creating collages digitally, and then placing and living them as they are, to me is removing labor, removing sweat, removing blood, tears, and the human spirit. And so painting I had to paint this work. It had to exist outside of the digital.
We are coming to our last segment before we open it up to you so that you can ask some questions. But I would like to, this exhibition, of course, is part of this large continuum of figurative painting in art history. And Jabba, you mentioned that earlier. The oldest artist in the show is Clementine Hunter, was born 1886, and the youngest artist is South African Zandile Tschabalala, born 1999. So that's a wide spectrum of time and generations and forms and practices. It's part of really a long continuum of figurative painting. And I would like to hear from you which were the artistic influences for you in that kind of space, in that kind of temporality, and why. If you can, draw your practice from very specific places of inspiration.
Well, I'm going to start with some of the artists that are in the show. I think that's a great context. Someone like Clementine Hunter would actually be an artist I'm very much inspired by. Clementine Hunter's from Louisiana, which is where my family is from as well. And I'm very much inspired by kind of, I don't like this term like naivete, but also I would say like the simplicity of her silhouettes and shapes. And in terms of like a continuum of aesthetics and like philosophies around aesthetics, I feel like you can see other artists that have worked in that same vein and added additional complications. Someone like Jacob Lawrence, again, where the silhouette, it's so prominent in the works. Someone like Ramir Bearden, where there's a silhouette, but now it becomes a collage element, and it's also very prominent. Someone like from Ramir Bearden, I would speak to an artist that's a huge inspiration of mine, who's Faith Ringgold, where the collage becomes more assemblage, or things are cut out, and it becomes even more material in terms of her use of textiles. And an artist that's a contemporary of her would be like Dinga McCannon, who also used textiles and like silhouettes and cutouts and kind of assemblages in wood and in fabric to also like further her aesthetic language. So these are all artists that I'm very much inspired by, and it's nice to see the relationship between from one to the next, from generation to generation, and everyone kind of pouring into the same pot and pulling out too at the same time. So I like to see myself kind of in that trajectory of those artists, and I can see myself as kind of working in a similar vein to all of the people I just mentioned, but in this very moment in time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful that you mentioned Clementine Hunter, one of the souls, and Faith Ringgold. Kuti?
Certainly, I would say Lynette Yadumoboyake was one of my early influences. And also reading an article while I was studying about Kerry James Marshall and his emphasis on having blackness in museums pushed me, or gave me sort of the courage to continue. And these were, before that there was influences from figurative painters like Jenny Saville, who is heavily influenced by. And yeah, where my influences come from isn't necessarily painting. In fact, it's
Please share.
Yeah, and there is a vast category of influences. Let's say music from Zimbabwe, punk rock, spending time on Tumblr, very silly things like this.
But that's great. I mean, that you mentioned music. You know, when Tanda and I were developing the show, at some point, I mean, it was important and obvious for us to place the exhibition also under a blanket of sound and, you know, music that speaks to the time that the show covers, because we all know that all artists, regardless of the medium that they work with, they are accompanied by expressions that are not necessarily artistic per se. Literature, cinema, music, very, very important. So we collaborated with South African sound artist, composer, thinker, Neo Muyenga. I don't know if Neo is in the room, maybe, whom we commissioned with a translation of the exhibition, of the different chapters of the exhibition into soundscapes that are embedded in the installation in the choreography of the show as moments of really engaging with the works through the music that is there. The exhibition has 6 chapters, and this is the last segment that we're going to speak about. And this is a question for you, Chaba. The fact that the exhibition has 6 chapters that all relate to joy. And can you tell us about your work that is in the show and it's coming up, which is called The Belly Fat? And maybe the fact that you write belly fat, BELLYPHAT, as opposed to FAT. That's the work. And what does that do?
So this painting, I'm just going to describe it for a moment. It's a woman that's like pregnant, and she's hugging her lover behind her.
Mm-hmm.
So the belly fat is meant to refer to the fact that she's obviously has a large stomach because she's pregnant, which is somewhat obvious. But then but I'm spelling it with fat with a PH. Is this a nod to like Black American like vernacular? So the fat is also to add a bit of endearment to the fat. Just like, so that's not like fat as a description. It's fat as a more expressive, endearing term. Mm-hmm. And it's also to situate the work within a Black experience through a simple gesture of the titling and through a simple gesture of changing the spelling to situate it within a contemporary Black American vernacular and experience. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We still have a little bit of time, and Kimberly has not come yet. And there is a microphone going around in the room, or two actually. If you have any comments, questions, we would love to engage with you on those. Don't be shy.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relation of the figure to space, represented space on the one hand, but then also both of you sort of deal with exhibition space in a particular way. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more.
Is it a curatorial question or an artistic question? I think it's both. Carry on.
For me, a lot of my early works was just the figure in a kind of no defined space. You kind of see that in the work Belly Fat that was made in 2016. And the purpose of that, it has a conceptual purpose and also a formal purpose. On the formal end, because the works are so busy in the figure, it's almost as if the figure itself is the environment. And that kind of deals with a lot of my feelings about the figure. I feel like the figure is the site of the experience. So it's not really about the location, because I feel like I want the viewer to be focusing on what's happening like in terms of like the emotionally for that figure, psychologically for that figure. So just like their body is the location. It's also kind of this dislocating of the body from the self, which for me nods to the fact that the figure is more than its body. It has a consciousness, it has a spirit, it has something that's outside of its physical reality. So kind of naming the body as a site also creates a separation between the character and its body, which I think is important for like some of the conceptual concerns in the work. In more recent works, this piece here is actually from my Bodega Run series, which is fully dedicated to a location. So the environment was always meant to mirror that space. And a bodega is basically a grocery store, a small corner store. They only exist in New York or in the American like Northeast for the most part. And some of those works are more literal in terms of describing the environment, and other ones, the merchandise is kind of used to create this abstraction of a real life environment. In terms of the installation for my shows, I like to create like an immersive experience for viewers, and the purpose of that is to like really name the space as the space of the subjects in the work, the characters. I feel like it kind of gives more power to the figures in the works, and it helps, I think, the viewer to have a truly like transformative experience when engaging with the work. I also think it's more productive to see my work outside of like the white cube. So by bringing some of the repeated patterns that exist in the paintings out into the exhibition space, having sculptures that kind of mirror the figures in the paintings, having functional art objects, these furniture pieces that again are mirrored in the paintings and exist in the space, I think it kind of helps really to name the environment as something that's made specifically for these artworks. So.
Hello. I have a question for all three of you. But before leading on to that question, Koyo, I just wanted to say thank you very much for the exhibition. It's absolutely brilliant. it's funny because I've known about this exhibition since it was in Cape Town, but I never thought I was going to ever see it. And I saw it for the first time yesterday, and it was just incredible. It evoked a lot of feelings and emotions and thoughts, and very much so because I found a lot of relativity with the work that I'm doing, working with artists who, similar to Kudzanai, they just want to, they kind of want to steer away from the political or what they're used to seeing in terms of what people call, quote unquote, black art in contemporary art spaces. And it was amazing, like navigating the show, even everything from the soundscapes and even just the choice of colors in the space resonated a lot with the work that I'm doing. And so it was really nice to be able to see that, especially not having, even though I'd known about the show, not actually knowing much detail about the show and your motivations for it. And I suppose it leads me on to the question for all three of you, like, what next? And I suppose it's for you to answer first, Koyo. Like, this exhibition has taken place in Cape Town, it's here in Basel. You know, of course, with Zeitmoker, you're going to be moving on to other projects and other exhibitions. But in terms of this, you know, kind of like thinking about joy and kind of moving away maybe from more negative narratives around, you know, blackness globally, like, do you have anything in place, or have you already started thinking about, you know, what else could come from this in a different variation, a different type of exhibition or presentation? Because this is something that I've been thinking about as I do these projects as well. Like, I just don't want it to be, you know, kind of like, okay, we've done it, and then we move on to, we kind of leave it behind, if that makes sense.
That's thank you for that question, and thank you for your kind words. Let me answer it from an institutional kind of perspective. I mean, I'm called an exhibition maker, but I'm actually an institution builder who happen to work with art and artists to do what we do, right? And when you ask the question about what's next, and I think that what I can say to it is that the very fact that we are making Zeitmoker as a very strong, important museum and as a site of civic engagement about the Black experience in the world. I believe that it is a way for us, of course, to write different chapters of our art history, but also to decenter the white gaze from our living experience and our historical and contemporary experience. So in that way, I believe we can carve spaces of freedom, you know, the same way somehow someone like Kutsi quite intentionally carves herself a space of freedom in her practice to be in the space of contemplation, to be in the space of emotion, to be in the space of spirituality, without necessarily always, you know, weighing ourselves down with everything that, you know, Blackness has been associated with and continues to be associated with. So I think that's powerful. That's powerful in the sense that to take that freedom and to take that liberty to be else than what is expected, so to speak. So, and transported or translated it into an institutional kind of framework, it provides, it gives you endless possibility and endless room to understand what can be, you know, what kind of stories, because at the end of the day, it's about storytelling. What kind of stories do we want to share? That's my take on your question. You want to take it?
Thank you.
We can take a last question. Or two last one, if there are any. There's a gentleman here, and there's a lady right there. Oh, there's another lady there. So three last questions.
I was sort of struck not so much by joy in this exhibition as by life. And in a strange way, not everything that I saw related at all to joy, but it did relate to what I think it was Kerry James Marshall said, the ordinariness of Black life, and that it was normal and regular. Am I wrong? It's like, it's life.
Thank you. There is a late, no?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. Just a quick question as it relates to the music. The exhibition, again, to echo what this woman commented before, was absolutely phenomenal. And I think one of the things that I experienced as I was walking through is there were a lot of people who maybe stopped and looked at a painting, and then they started moving a little bit, and there was a shimmy here and there. And then I saw a lot of people putting their phones up to see if they could Shazam it, to see if we could find the music. And so I guess my question is, you have a gorgeous coffee table book, you have a lot of background information on the artists. Is there any way that we can find the music?
Yes, definitely. The music, you can access the music. There are QR codes on both websites of Kunstmuseum Basel as well as Zeitmoka. Very easily accessible. Yeah. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Kudzanai. Thank you so much, Csaba, for this conversation. Young, gifted, and heavily successful and beautiful Black, strong artist. It's a pleasure for me to be working with you, and thank you for coming, and thank you for your interest. And those who haven't seen the show yet, go see it. Those who have seen it, tell others that they have to see it. That's how it works. Thank you.